Hi, I'm Michael Brindley, education reporter for the Nashua Telegraph, and this is One-on-One. And today we're here with Dr. Brian Cochrane, Director of Accountability and Assessment for the Nashua School District. And today we're going to be talking about assessment and standardized testing and how it fits into the Nashua School District. Welcome, Brian.
Well, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
And the reason for the topic this month is, as I understand it, students across the district have been taking the NECAP, which is the New England Common Assessment Program. And I was hoping to learn more about that test, how it relates to Nashua, and how the students are faring, and how it's used in the school to assess student progress. So maybe we could start a little bit by talking about the NECAP, what it is, and go from there.
NECAP is, as you said, the New England Common Assessment Program. It was started, first set of assessments was rolled out in October of 2005, and the three states involved were Vermont, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire. And just this year, Maine has also joined, so it's now a four-state consortium. It is the four states' required assessments under No Child Left Behind, which means in October we assess grades 3 through 8 in reading and math, and also grades 5, 8, and 11 in writing, and of course 11s do reading and math as well. So those results are done annually. It's used to fulfill the NCLB requirements in terms of whether or not schools are making adequate yearly progress and whether or not the district is making adequate yearly progress, but we also use those results to help improve instruction at the same time.
And so how's the district fared under NECAP since its inception to now, basically?
By and large, we tend to score slightly below the state average. We have both, the state has improved, significantly from 2005 to 2009 results. We have lagged a little bit. In the last 3 or 4 years, we became first a district in need of improvement for reading, put together a district plan and school plans for schools that were in need of improvement in reading, and we've seen significant growth in that area, especially in our Title I schools. In terms of math, we've not got the same level of growth and gain that we have in reading. We currently have a district steering committee now looking at K-12 math and how we're going to move forward in that. And we'll build on what we've learned from the reading improvement in what we're doing in math. We also have NECAP science that's done in May at grades 4, 8, and 11. So those are end-of-year assessments, and we get results. The contract between the NECAP states and Measured Progress, who's the test developer and administrator, requires that a quarter of the common items be released every year. So schools and districts have availability for those assessments. They find out, literally down to each student what their answer was on a multiple choice. If the correct answer is C, and we get literally every student what they did on it. And so at least on a subset of those assessments, we get some very detailed data. Now, unfortunately, we don't get them. They'll be written this month. NECAP uses both multiple choice and also constructed response items, and it I think gives a much better quality assessment in terms of the things that we can get at, requiring students to create written responses both in math and in reading and writing, which I think we talked about 5, 8, and 11. And so NECAP really is seen as one of the better examples of how to use different types of questions. A lot of states, or the majority of states, actually only use multiple choice questions. Mm-hmm. So, we will get back student scores and all those things in January, and then we'll get our AYP results in the spring. But it does mean that we're able to take a look at students where they are. The difficulty is that we don't get it until January. The school year is half over, and it can be somewhat helpful, but to have more timely feedback would be helpful. The balance is, if we wanted to get it sooner, we could do it, but we'd have to opt for only multiple choice assessments. And I think, the NECAP states have made a good choice. It does take a little bit longer, but I think it gives a higher quality assessment and a better read of really where students are at any given point in time.
And so the district is legally required under federal law to do these tests. Am I correct on that?
Absolutely.
Under No Child Left Behind, which is at this point being debated for reauthorization, so the future will only see what happens then, but as it stands, the districts are required to do that.
Absolutely.
And so basically under that premise, I guess, so basically the question is, what is the balance between teaching to what's on those tests versus what students should be learning? And that's, I guess, is that something you guys have to deal with?
I mean, both the tests and what teachers teach should both be based on the state expectations for what should be learned at a particular grade level. So you could, if you wanted to, take a look at the released items and say, well, here are the things that we need to teach our students. But the released items will never be used again. Those are, one-time items that represent a sample of the things that we test. When it's done well, teachers teach so the students learn how to do the grade level expectations in math or whatever, and then the assessments have great fidelity to those state standards. And so what should happen is, if the instruction improves, either in terms of the quality of instruction or the alignment with the state GLEs, then the test scores, by happy coincidence, go up. And that's really how we try to deal with it at Nashua, that it's all about the quality of instruction and the alignment of the instruction. And if we can improve both the alignment and the quality of instruction, then good things happen in a variety of ways, and by the way, the test scores go up. And we have seen some significant improvement, most notably the high schools in reading and math. This high schools, this is only the fourth test administration. In the very first year, the percentage, the district was about 7 points behind the state in percentage proficient reading, and we've caught up that 7-point gap in only 2 instructional years. And in writing, we were even further behind the state, and we've actually, on district average, surpassed the state this last time around. So tremendous growth in reading and writing at the high school. Middle school has lagged somewhat, but elementary schools, especially our Title I schools, and some of our non-Title I schools have shown tremendous growth. New Searles, for example, this last year had a phenomenal assessment year in every way you'd like to measure it.
And parents hear a lot of these acronyms that are thrown around. You hear NECAP, but also you hear AYP and school in need of improvement. What does it mean to be a school in need of improvement? How does that happen? And what does it mean for the school?
Becoming a school in need of improvement or a district in need of improvement happens if you do not make adequate yearly progress, AYP, in either as a whole school or in one subgroup. So because of the diversity of the Nashua population, it's much more difficult for us to make AYP. We report out, some schools report out on whole school, everybody reports out on male and female. In order to report out at each grade level, you have to have 11 students, because if you're reporting on 3 or 4 students and you're going to make publicly available how those students do, because all of this stuff is available on the state website, then students could be individually identified. And each state sets its own number in terms of how many students are required to do that. And New Hampshire and the other NECAP states set a fairly low number. If there are 10 or fewer students, they do not release them. So it's 11 students or more, the results are released. So if you look at most districts in New Hampshire, they'll report out whole school, male, female, Caucasian population, and probably low SES students.
Which is low income students.
Low income, poverty as defined by the state. In Nashua, we have schools that also have ELL. In fact, most of our schools report out on ELL, special education, and ethnicities, Hispanics, blacks, Asians. If any one of those subgroups in any test doesn't score proficient or doesn't show growth, sufficient growth towards proficiency for all students in that group, then the entire school doesn't make AYP.
Getting to that premise of leaving no child behind, you want to attack those, get into those, low subgroups and bring those scores up. So I guess in that context, do you feel like it's been successful in doing that?
I think it's been successful in shining a light on areas where attention needed to be given. AYP by itself has some aspects to it that may not make the greatest amount of sense. I mean, we typically set educational goals that are pretty aspirational. It means something if someone is proficient. So to have an expectation that by 2014, 100% of students will be proficient, we know is unrealistic. And if things remain as they are, every school in the country will be in a school in need of improvement, because all it takes is one student in any school to not be proficient and you don't make it. But it is aspirational, and as one person commented to me a few years ago, no one is going to get re-elected voting for a piece of legislation called leaving only a few children behind. So No Child Left Behind is what it is. It is there are different accountability systems. State level accountability systems differ from some federal ones. For example, if you do less well in math but better in science or better in reading or writing, they sort of compensate for it. There's no compensation at all in No Child Left Behind. If one subgroup fails in any subject, reading or math, then you fail.
And so basically, you talked about those subgroups. You talked about low SES. You talked about ethnicity, special education. Focusing on special education, is it my understanding that the students, most of the special education students, take the same test as all other students? Is that correct? And how is that differentiated between the more severely special education students?
Under NCLB rules, up to 2% of your students can take an alternative portfolio assessment, and the state isn't currently revamping that system. Which basically gives a snapshot of the student. And what we're moving to now is a system that shows more growth over time, but not to the GLEs. Maximum 2% of students can use the alt portfolio. Maximum of 1% of students can score proficient or better through that. So you can see that someone who's in the 3rd percentile by 2014 would have to score proficient in order for the entire school to. Now, if you looked at the IQ range and the distribution of scores, if you're a believer in IQ, the 3rd percentile is an IQ of about 70, which means that it's very difficult. I mean, if we wrote educational standards so that the lowest person on the spectrum it would be appropriate for, then it would be very inappropriate for the vast majority. So as I said, we tend to write educational plans and educational standards that are aspirational in nature, and special education does cause difficulty in terms of getting the sort of growth that we require. Now, there are lots of categories of disability, and one of the things that we've done in the last couple of years here is really try to spend some time focusing in on the special ed population, not necessarily through No Child Left Behind, but in some cases using data available from No Child Left Behind, and say, for example, for students who are emotionally handicapped, well, they show the normal range often of intellectual capability. And so we end up spending more money and putting more resources around them, and in some cases we're getting some significant growth. We tend to talk about student growth and improvement in achievement by talking about things like a year's growth. And typically we would define a year's growth as if the student scores at a certain level on NECAP one year and scores at that same level the next year, basically, then we'd say they will have gotten a year's growth for a year's instruction. Well, often by the time we identify students for an EH program, they will be behind. And so we're actually trying not to get just a year's growth for a year's instruction, because while that's a good thing, they'll always stay behind. Our goal is to get more than a year's growth, getting some catch-up growth for those students. And we're finding that in many cases we are doing that. Not as much as we would like, but using the data over time and looking at where we're getting the growth that we're looking for and where we're not, we're able to use those, plus benchmark assessments that we've developed and used in the district to try and improve instruction and improve the learning in classrooms.
And you talked about the focus that's on math and reading. One of the criticisms of NCLB has been that it kind of leaves social studies and science and other subjects that most people would consider to be pretty important kind of in the back burner. So is that a concern for the district? How does the district approach that?
I think it's more of a concern for Title I schools. Unfortunately, there is a pretty strong correlation between the percentage of students in poverty and the number of kids who show up to school not having the level of readiness for kindergarten or grade 1 that we would like. So while we think of grade 1 as the start of school officially, in reality there's a level of preparedness for school that we have, or expectations that we have. And so to say, for example, that we have a student who comes to their first day of school and they're a year behind where we expect them to be, or even 2 years behind, that is their vocabulary, the understanding of language structure. We have refugee students or students who will come to school and have not been read to, or if they've been read to, they've been read to in another language, who don't know how to hold a crayon, who don't know that I mean, all of the things that come in. We have kids coming in at 5 years of age who spell their name and recognize letters of the alphabet and can count and so on. And for a student who walks in with none of those skills, it's a lot of remediation. And by and large, that K-2 period is the area where we spend a lot of time and effort and energy trying to do that remediation. Now, what we've seen across the state and in Nashua is tremendous growth in our fall grade 3 reading and writing results, which really shows that the work that we've done, the hard work that we've done at K-2 level, really has shown some significant increase.
And you look at the scores, they seem to get, I guess, progressively less proficient, or they show less proficiency as you get up into the higher grades in the high schools. And one of the thoughts has been maybe students aren't taking it as seriously because it doesn't count towards anything toward them. Do you find that to be the case, or is there any way to have the students?
The trend the first couple of years was that NECAP results would, the grade 3s would be the best, and then 4s, 5s, 6, 7, 8 would be less proficient. By the time we had the third or the fourth administration of the test, we were actually sort of maintaining. And so what's happened is our scores have improved primarily because students entering grade 3 now at a higher level. And we're starting to see not just maintenance of the percentage proficient, but in fact increases in that, and we're seeing that at the state level as well. So much of the growth at the state level and at the national level has been K-2, but we're also now starting to see particular grade levels where we'll get not just 73% of students were proficient and stays at 73, but in fact schools where that grows over time. So we're learning as we go, and improving more so in reading and writing than math. But a lot of people are working very hard. So realistically, some schools are more impacted because they have more students that need that remedial work, and it takes away from the ability to offer the breadth of the curriculum in K-2. But it's hard to argue from an educational perspective that that's a bad decision, because literacy and numeracy skills are so important to that later success in science and social studies and all of the other areas. So we recognize that our Title I schools will probably struggle in science in terms of making the growth that they want. But it's not that we let them off the hook for that, but we have to be realistic and balance it. If we're not seeing as much growth as we would like in science, but we're seeing the sort of growth that we want in reading and math, then it's worth it.
And looking beyond the NECAP, how many other assessments does this district do? And I guess going into that debate of how much testing is too much testing, do you feel like, what other things does the district do to assess
we do
student growth?
End of year, we have done for a considerable time, end of year assessments in elementary school in grades 1 through 5. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze here. In reading and math, and we changed the format this last June, and we did a math assessment that was much more aligned with NECAP, and it's easier to score and gets results back to teachers very quickly, and we're very pleased with that. We just developed a mid-year test to go with that, so grades 2, 3, 4, and 5 students will write a mid-year and an end-of-year test, which will give teachers immediate feedback on the students and where they're getting progress and where they're not. We'll also be doing that in reading at the end of the year this year, grades 2, 3, 4, and 5. We're looking at the possibility of benchmark assessments in the middle school, and of course through the Smaller Learning Communities grant, we have a series of 5 benchmark assessments in reading and math across grades 9 and 10. And both high schools, North and South, developed their own benchmark assessments in science last year. So we're collecting a lot more data. I think when you hear complaints of too much testing, what it really reflects is we're testing and we're getting data, but we're either not using it or we're not using it well. So people are frustrated that they're losing instructional time. The reality is there's very, very few schools around the country that they're assessing too much. It most often reflects, and if you think of grade 8 as probably the worst example, they take October, and every grade 8 student takes reading, writing, math, then in the spring they'll take science, right? But it's never, only with science is it results that reflect the grade 8 instructional year. Because it's in October, it's really about the grade 7 instructional year, so they give up a lot of instructional time, and really the grade 8 teachers get very little information for it.
And just finally, what do you see as, I guess, the future of NCLB? Do you track that, or what do you see there?
Well, currently there's 2 major consortiums that are working on the next generation of assessments. New Hampshire and about a dozen other states are members of both consortiums, and it looks like in about 3 years, we'll be transitioning to that next generation of assessments, and we will have 1 or 2 options nationally. The work has begun on that. The grants were funded. So NCLB, as we know, well, NECAP as we know it will go away. But one of the nice things for us is that NECAP is probably the best example nationally of a consortium of states working together to do this. So as we move towards the Common Core, we've actually had more experience than almost anybody in the country at doing this. So we're relatively well positioned. And it's not like good teaching and learning is going to change that much, but some things are going to change from one grade level to another.
I want to thank you, Brian, for coming in today, and thank you for tuning in to One on One.
My pleasure. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, folks.